Okay, let's see. Just a sec. And we are live. Hello. How's everyone doing? Let me just get the screen sorted. Okay, that should do it. Let's move you over there. Hey, how's everyone doing? Having a good night? Good evening? So, well, welcome to Soul's Place. This is my island, and this is where I stream from. And this is where I will be streaming tonight's ASMR Storytime stream. Now, be aware, the microphone quality will go up in a minute. Let's check something here. Yep, the mic quality will go up shortly. That's because I'm presently on my headset mic while I'm in a full body in VR with my legs and everything. But when we actually start reading the 1001 Nights, I will sit at the desk and put on the proper mic. So, but as we're just kind of starting out, I'm going to give a few minutes, see if anybody joins just before we kind of get started. So that's what we're doing right now. Okay, well, may as well have a quick show around. That's going to follow me. Yeah, yes, it is. Have a quick show around the island. So eagle-eyed viewers will notice that this is Seabreeze by Whimsical. It's quite a well-known VR chat world. Whimsical is an amazing VR chat world creator. Like their stuff is just incredible. Really nice detail, lovely backlight lighting. It's just great. Really good for chilling. This world was a big part of the inspiration for these kinds of streams and the stuff that I want to do. Just I landed on this place and I looked around and I was just, this is it. This is the place. This is what I want these streams to be. So let me have a quick walk around. That's going to follow me, isn't it? Yes, it is. Wonderful. So we have the fire pit here. And lovely, lovely fire pit. And if I move over the other side, we have the hot tub. It's actually almost a kind of infinity hot tub. I don't know if that could even exist in real life, but then I guess that's the best part of VR chat, right? Things don't have to be things that could really exist, and I guess that's part of the fun. Then let's see what else we got. Okay, so I will just move over here and let's go upstairs. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull you back over here. So I am really terrible at trying to use VR chat's camera in a hurry, so this is going to take a moment. Oh, that was fast. So anchor, cool, and strange Windows problem there. But what is a stream without a little bit of scuff? It's part of the fun. Okay, there we go. Have a look at me turned off. And perfect. So we have a few things worth seeing here. So we have pool table. It's actually a pretty good pool table asset as well. I've played a lot of games of that with people in this world. And see, this is the nice thing about this place. The mood is so nice. Like if you I just kind of move. If I just kind of move, and you can see just how it's really nice and dim in here. And then, yeah, and then I look out the window and see nice and bright. No, it's, it's just really nice. Let's turn the camera around, make it a little bit easier to show you this. We have red trees. Let's go downstairs. Downstairs. Okay, here we go. And then we have bath and shower. Second bedroom, just in case. Might have guests over, you never know. And that is the tour. So, 1 second. We have a couple of viewers, so that's great. That's a good start. So, I'm gonna just give it another couple of minutes, see if we can get one or two more. Just before we start reading the book, it would be a shame if people missed the beginning, because I don't know who has read the Thousand and One Nights, sometimes called the Arabian Nights. That's what it used to be called, but these days usually called the 1001 Nights. And it's this collection of short stories told in a framing device. Well, you'll see when we start reading, but it would be good for people to see the start. Well, yeah, the start. So we'll just give it a moment. So I think, yeah, let's chill for a minute. Wait and see if people join. Yeah, it's probably gonna be fine. Now we find out if my full body will tolerate me lying down. Let's see. It should do. Just putting a pillow down. Now you're gonna see the super undignified way that I'm gonna get on the floor. There we go. Yeah, that'll do. Nothing beats. Nothing beats a spot of relaxation at the beach. Nice blue sky. Okay. Let's just give it just the moment. What time is it now? Give it like another 5 minutes, and then we'll get going. Get started. Let's fly you up a little bit more. For anyone just joining, this isn't going to be the general vibe. We're going to start reading the story in a minute. Just, uh, just in a moment. Just, giving people a moment to join. No, I'm not doing sit-ups. Nobody asked. Okay, chat. Any of you paying attention? Who here has read 1001 Nights, or the Arabian Nights, as it was called? Or has had it read to you? You know, that's a good point. I don't know if I've ever actually read the book. I've had it read to me. That was as a child, but hmm, yeah, this might be my first time actually reading the text as well. Well, in any case, The 1001 Nights is a classic. It's translated, I believe, very early 20th century into English and collected together from a wide variety of different sources. Um, to be to be fair, you know, let's be quite honest. You're talking in the kind of post-Victorian era, and those people didn't always have the most respect for the cultures of the Middle East. Okay, I mean we can all just kind of agree that, but they are a collection of very whimsical and fantastical stories, and they're a classic. I think a lot of British school children probably have it read to them at some point in time. Hmm. Okay, I think it's time to stand up and start setting things up to read the book. So let me just try and get up. You know, standing up in VR is not easy. I mean, it's about as easy as standing up in real life, which is not easy. Gravity, my one enemy. Oh, the one boss that nobody can ever defeat. Let's just kick this over here. Okay. Right. Let me just check my blue sky. So the announcement went out. All right. Seems like you guys are viewers unless somebody joins in a moment. So I am going to just look at you while I talk to you. I am going to switch to the desktop for the desktop microphone because that's what I need for PKSMR content. I will do that now, and I will be right back because it's going to take a moment. Okay. We are back. Hello. Hey. So, right, let's see. Okay. Right. I think I think we might be ready. Ooh. Let's get the page lined up with everything we need. Right, I think that's gonna do it. So chat. A lot of people here might not have read The 1001 Nights. You might be familiar with it. And if that's the case, you are in for something of a treat. It is whimsical in tone, fantastical, and composed of a number of short stories. I don't think it's actually 1,000, but you're probably familiar with many things from it, even if you've never read the actual book. So there are stories such as Alibaba and the 40 Thieves, Aladdin and the Lamp. These are all things that kind of, well, I mean, let's face it, many of them got Disneyfied in decades and centuries since, but they descend from stories that have their origin in the collection of tales that became the 1001 Nights. So we will begin. To proceed, there we go. To proceed, the lives of former generations are a lesson to posterity, that they may then review remarkable events which have happened to others, and be admonished, and may consider the history of people in preceding ages, and of all that hath befallen them, and be restrained. Extolled be the perfection of him who hath thus ordained the history of former generations to be a lesson to those which follow. Such are the tales of 1001 Nights, with their romantic stories and their fables. It is related, but God alone is all-knowing, as well as all-wise and almighty and all-bountiful. This is a good point just to step to one side of the text and just say there are a lot of references in the early and later parts of the text to translated what are essentially Islamic blessings. And this is because this was a stylistic thing that was common in Muslim era kind of literature for that kind of era. So there will be a few things that sound like that have an almost biblical tone, because when they translate to English, they do sound quite similar. It is not a religious text, really, but there are some of these allusions to that. It is related that there was, in ancient times, a king of the countries of India and China, possessing numerous troops and guards and servants and domestic dependents. And he had 2 sons, one of whom was a man of mature age, and the other a youth. Both of these princes were brave horsemen, but especially the elder, who inherited the kingdom of his father and governed his subjects with such justice that the inhabitants of his country and the whole empire loved him. He was called King Shahryar. His younger brother was named Shah Zaman and was king of Samarkand. The administration of their governments was conducted with rectitude, each of them ruling over his subjects with justice during a period of 20 years, with the utmost enjoyment and happiness. After this period, the elder king felt a strong desire to see his brother, and ordered his vizier to repair here to him and bring him. Having taken the advice of the vizier on this subject, he immediately gave orders to prepare handsome presents, such as horses adorned with gold and costly jewels, and memlooks, and beautiful virgins and expensive stuffs. He then wrote a letter to his brother, expressive of his great desire to see him, and having sealed it and given it to the vizier, together with the presents above mentioned, he ordered the minister to strain his nerves, tuck up his skirts, and use all expedition in returning. The vizier answered, "Without delay I hear and obey," and forthwith prepared for the journey. He packed his baggage, removed burdens, and made ready all his provisions within 3 days. And on the 4th day he took leave of the king Shahryar, and went forth towards the deserts and the wastes. He proceeded night and day, and each of the kings under the authority of King Shahryar, whose residence he passed, came forth to meet him, with costly presents and gifts of gold and silver, and they entertained him 3 days, after which, on the 4th day, he accompanied him 1 day's journey, and took leave of him. Thus he continued on his way until he drew near the city of Samarkand, where he sent forward a messenger to inform King Shah Zaman of his approach. The messenger entered the city, inquired the way to the palace, and introduced himself to the king, kissed the ground before him, and acquainted him with the approach of his brother's vizier. Upon which Shah Zaman ordered the chief officers of his court and the great men of his kingdom to go forth a day's journey to meet him. And they did so, and when they met him, they welcomed him and walked by his stirrups until they returned to the city. The vizier then presented himself before King Shah Zaman. Oh, slight cough there. Greeted him with a prayer for the divine assistance in his favour, kissed the ground before him, and informed him of his brother's desire to see him, after which he handed him the letter. The king took it, read it, and understood its contents, and answered by expressing his readiness to obey the commands of his brother. "But," said he, addressing the vizier, "I will not go until I have entertained thee 3 days." Accordingly, he lodged him in a palace befitting his rank, accommodated his troops in tents, and appointed them all things requisite in the way of food and drink. And so they remained 3 days, and on the 4th day he equipped himself for the journey, made ready his baggage, and collected together costly presents suitable to his brother's dignity. These preparations being completed, he sent forth his tents and camels and mules and servants and guards, appointed his vizier to be governor of the country during his absence, and set out towards his brother's dominions. At midnight, however, he remembered that he had left in his palace an article which he should have brought with him, and having returned to the palace to fetch it, he there beheld his wife sleeping in his bed, attended by a slave, who had fallen asleep by her side. On beholding this scene, the world became black before his eyes, and he said within himself, "If this is the case when I have not departed from the city, what will be the conduct of this vile woman while I am sojourning with my brother?" He then drew his sword and slew them both in the bed, after which he immediately returned, gave orders for departure, and journeyed to his brother's capital. So, this is a good moment to say, this is a very old collection of stories, and they, again, as I said before we started reading, that the Victorians, or this is kind of post-Victorian era, they did not always have the greatest of respect for the Persian world, the world of the Middle East, the cultures and things that came from there, and also they used words and terminology that we would not use today, even in actually many of them are, I guess, acceptable in an academic context, but not in an entertainment context. So I will, at certain points, omit certain words as I see fit, because that seems to be appropriate. I'll try not to do that too much, because we want to try and get the flavor of the text, but I'll try and make sure that we don't lose too much. But there are some things that I will not say, and really most people in 2025 should not say. Certain people of color can choose to use those words if they feel free, and I have no objection to that, but I will not. So let's keep going. Schahriar, rejoicing at the tidings of his approach, went forth to meet him, saluted him, and welcomed him with the utmost delight. He then ordered that the city should be decorated on the occasion, and sat down to entertain his brother with cheerful conversation. The mind of King Schahzaman was distracted by reflections of the conduct of his wife. Excessive grief took possession of him, and his countenance became sallow, his frame emaciated. His brother observed him, his altered condition, and imagining that it was occasioned by his absence from his dominions, abstained from troubling him, or asking the cause, until after the lapse of some days, when at length he said to him, "O my brother, I perceive that thy body is emaciated, and thy countenance is become sallow." He answered, "O brother, I have an internal sore," and he informed him not of the conduct of his wife which he had witnessed. Schahriar then said, "I wish that thou wouldst go out with me on a hunting excursion. Perhaps thy mind might be so diverted." But he declined, and Schahriar went alone to the chase. Now there were some windows in the king's palace, commanding a view of his garden. Let me just check something here. Yeah, okay, so that looks okay. Now there were some windows in the king's palace, commanding a view of his garden, and whilst his brother was looking out from one of these,
a door of the palace was opened, and there came forth from it 20 females and 20 male black slaves, and the king's wife, who was distinguished by extraordinary beauty and elegance, accompanied them to a fountain, where they all disrobed themselves and sat down together. The king's wife then called out, "O Masood," and immediately a slave came to her and embraced her, she doing the like. And so also did the other slaves and women, and all of them continued revelling together until the close of day. When Schahzaman beheld this spectacle, he said within himself, "My affliction is lighter than this." His vexation and grief were alleviated, and he no longer abstained from sufficient food and drink. When his brother returned from his excursion, and they had saluted each other, and King Shahryar observed his brother Schahzaman, that his colour had returned, that his face had recovered the flush of health, and he ate with appetite. After his late abstinence, he was surprised, and said, "O my brother, when I saw thee last, thy countenance was sallow, and now thou hast colour returning to thee. Acquaint me with thy state." "As to the change of my natural complexion," answered Schahzaman, "I will inform thee of its cause. But excuse my explaining to thee the return of my colour. First," said Shahryar, "relate to me the cause of thy change of thy proper complexion and of thy weakness. Let me hear it." "Know then, O my brother," he answered, "that when thou sentest thy vizier to me to invite me to thy presence, I prepared myself for the journey, and when I had gone forth from the city, I remembered that I had left behind the jewel that I have given thee. I therefore returned to my palace for it, and there I found my wife sleeping in my bed, and attended by a male slave. I killed them both, and came to thee, but my mind was occupied by reflections upon this affair, and this was the cause of the change of my complexion and of my weakness. Now, as to the return of my colour, excuse my informing thee of its cause." But when his brother heard these words, he said, "I conjure thee that thou acquaint me with the cause of the return of thy colour." And he repeated to him all he had seen. "I would see this," said Shahryar, "with my own eye." Then said Schahzaman, "Give out that thou art going again to the chase, and conceal thyself here with me, and thou shalt witness this conduct, and obtain ocular proof of it." Ocular proof. I love the phrasing. Ocular proof. That's quite a nice one, if you think about it. Just a second. We'll continue in a moment. Okay. So the brother has hatched a plan. Shahryar, upon this, immediately announced that it was his intention to make another excursion. The troops went out of the city with the tents, and the king followed them, and after he had reposed a while in the camp, he said to his servants, "Let no one come in to me." And he disguised himself and returned to his brother in the palace, and sat in one of the windows overlooking the garden. Then, when he had been there a short time, the women and their mistress entered the garden with the black slaves, as did his brother had described, until the hour of afternoon prayer. See, there's one of those things. The women and their mistress entered the garden with the black slaves. So, as I said, there are certain words that I wouldn't use. It doesn't use the word black to describe. It doesn't use the really offensive word, but it uses a word that we wouldn't use today. But I think I'm just going to go with slaves. When King Shahryar beheld this occurrence, reason fled from his head, And he said to his brother Schahzaman, Arise, and let us travel whither we please, and renounce the regal state, until we see such a calamity as this have befallen any other person like unto us. And if not, our death will be preferable to our life. His brother agreed to his proposal, and they went out from a private door of the palace, and journeyed continually days and nights, until they arrived at a tree in the midst of a meadow, by a spring of water, on the shore of the sea. They drank of this spring, and sat down to rest, and when the day had little advanced, the sea became troubled before them, and there arose from it a black pillar, ascending towards the sky, and approaching the meadow. Struck with fear at the sight, they climbed into a tree, which was lofty, and thence they gazed to see what this might be. And behold, it was a genie, of gigantic stature, broad-fronted and bulky, bearing on his head a chest. He landed, and came to the tree, into which the two kings had climbed, and, having seated himself beneath it, opened the chest, and took out of it another box, which he also opened, and there he came forth from it a young woman, fair and beautiful, like the shining sun. When the genie cast his eyes upon her, he said, O lady of noble race, whom I carried off on thy wedding night, I have a desire to sleep a little. And he placed his head upon her knee, and slept. The damsel then raised her head towards the tree, and saw there the two kings, upon which she removed the head of the genie from her knee, and, having placed it on the ground, stood under the tree, and made signs for the two kings, as though she would say, Come down, and fear not this Ifrit. They answered her, We conjure thee by Allah that thou excuse us in this matter. But she said, I conjure you by the same that ye come down, and ye do not. I will rouse this Ifrit, and he shall put you to a cruel death. So, being afraid, they came down to her, and after they had remained with her as long as she required, she took from her pocket a purse, and drew out from this a string, upon which were 98 seal rings. She said to them, Know ye what are these? They answered, We know not. The owners of these rings, she said, all of them, have been admitted to converse with me, like as ye have, unknown to this foolish Ifrit. Therefore, give me your 2 rings, ye brothers. They gave their 2 rings from their fingers, and she said to them, This Ifrit carried me off on my wedding night, and put me in the box, and placed the box on the chest, and affixed the chest 7 locks, and deposited me, thus imprisoned, in the bottom of the roaring sea, beneath the dashing waves, not knowing that when one of our desires to accomplish any object... When one of our gender desires to accomplish any object, nothing can prevent her. In accordance with this, says one of the poets, Never trust in women, nor rely upon their vows, for their pleasure and displeasure depend upon their passions. They offer a false affection, for perfidy lurks within their clothing. By the tale of Yusuf be admonished, and guard against their stratagems. Dost thou not consider that Iblis ejected Adam by the means of a woman? Like I said, very old set of stories. Another poet says, Abstain from censure, for it will strengthen the censured, and increase desire into violent passion. If I suffer such passion, my case is but the same as that of many a man before me. For greatly indeed to be wondered at is he who hath kept himself safe from artifice. When the 2 kings heard these words from her lips, they were struck with the utmost astonishment, and said one to the other, If this is an Ifrit, and a greater calamity hath happened unto him than that which hath befallen us. This is a circumstance that should console us. And immediately they departed, returned to the city. It is kind of interesting that these two king guys, that they're something bad happens, and their plan, their whole kind of way to deal with this, it's not like some kind of medieval equivalent of therapy, but more kind of, let's go out and find someone that has it worse than us. And I guess in a way, this is interesting because, I don't know, I've had times like, chat, you must have had times like that too, right? Where things are going really bad and everything's terrible and it just feels like the whole world is falling apart. And sometimes it's really comforting just to watch something and think, oh, well, at least it could be worse. I sometimes find that if I'm really struggling, I watch like a war movie, like Band of Brothers. Well, I guess that's a series, not a movie, but you get what I mean. I watch like a war movie, World War II or something, and I just think, man, that's so terrifying, and I just can't imagine what it must have been like to be those people dealing with that kind of stuff. And so I guess it is something that people do, even today. Oh well. As soon as they had entered the palace, Schahriar caused his wife to be beheaded. Whoa, okay, that was fast. And in like manner, the women with the slaves. And thenceforth he made it his regular custom, every time that he took a virgin to his bed, to kill her at the expiration of the night. Thus he continued to do so during a period of 3 years, and the people raised an outcry against him, and fled with their daughters, and there remained not a virgin within the city of a sufficient age for marriage. Such was the case when the king ordered the vizier to bring him a virgin according to his custom, and the vizier went forth in search, and found none. And when he went back to his house enraged and vexed, fearing what the king might do to him. Now, the vizier had 2 daughters. This is, here we go. So, this is the part that I think most people will know. This is like the famous part of the story. Now, the vizier had 2 daughters, the elder of whom was named Scheherazade, and the younger, Dunyazad. The former had read various books of histories, and the lives of preceding kings, and the stories of past generations. And it is asserted that she had collected together 1,000 books of histories relating to preceding kings, and works of poets. And she said to her father on this occasion, "Why do I see thee thus changed, and oppressed with solicitude and sorrows?" It has been said by one of the poets, "Tell him who is oppressed with anxiety, that anxiety shall not last. As happiness passeth away, so passeth away anxiety." When the vizier heard these words from his daughter, he related to her all that had happened to him with regard to the king, upon which he said, "By Allah, O father, give me in marriage to the king. Either I shall die and be a ransom for one of the daughters, or I shall live and be the cause of their deliverance from him. I conjure thee by Allah," exclaimed he, "that thou expose not himself to such peril." But she said, "It must be so." Then said he, "I fear for thee that the same will befall thee that happened in the case of the ass and the bull and the husbandman." And what she asked was that, O my father. So, we're going to transition now into, this is one of the first stories. So now we're going to jump out of the framing device and into one of the tales. And this will be the general kind of pattern for the rest of the book. We jump kind of backwards and forwards between these 2 extremes. You ever seen The Princess Bride? It's exactly like that. I mean, you see, that sounds like a joke, but really it is actually quite a lot like that. I mean, okay, content-wise, it's nothing like that, but The idea of a framing device of a story that's told to someone, and their kind of character arc is part of the arc of the collected works. It's quite a novel idea at the time. So, well, Know, oh my daughter, this is the vizier telling the story, by the way, that there was a certain merchant who possessed wealth and cattle, and had a wife and children, and God had also endowed him with the knowledge of the language of the beasts and the birds. The abode of this merchant was in the country, and he had in his house an ass and a bull. When the bull came to the place where the ass was tied, he found it swept and sprinkled. In his manger there was sifted barley and sifted cut straw, and the ass was lying at his ease, his master being accustomed only to ride him occasionally when business required, and soon to return. And it happened one day that the merchant overheard the bull saying to the ass, "May thy food benefit thee. I am oppressed with fatigue. While thou art enjoying repose, thou eatest sifted barley, and men serve thee, and it is only occasionally that thy master rides thee, and returns, while I am continually employed in ploughing and turning the mill." The ass answered, "When thou goes out to the field, and they place the yoke upon thy neck, lie down, and do not rise again, even if they beat thee. Or, if thou rise, lie down a second time, and when they take thee back, and place the beans before thee, eat them not, as thou wast sick. Abstain from eating and drinking a day, or 2 days, or 3, and so shalt thou find rest from trouble and labour." Accordingly, when the driver came to the bull with his fodder, he scarcely ate any of it. And on the morrow, when the driver came again to take him to plough, he found him apparently quite infirm. So the merchant said, "Take the ass, and make him draw the plough in his stead all day." The man did so, and when the ass returned at the close of day, the bull thanked him for the favour he had conferred upon him, by relieving him of his trouble on that day. But the ass returned him no answer, for he repented most grievously. On the next day, the ploughman came again, and took the ass, and ploughed with him till evening. And the ass returned with his neck flayed by the yoke, and reduced to an extreme state of weakness. The bull looked upon him, and thanked him, and praised him. The ass exclaimed, "I was living at ease, and naught but my meddling hath injured me." Then he said to the bull, "Know that I am the one who would give thee good advice. I heard our master say, if the bull rise not from his place, take him to the butcher, that he may kill him, and make a natter of his skin. I am therefore in fear of thee, so I have given thee advice, and peace be on thee." And when the bull heard these words of the ass, he thanked him and said, "Tomorrow I will go with alacrity." So he ate the whole of his fodder, licked the manger clean, and their master was listening to their conversation. The following morning, the merchant and his wife went to the bull's crib, and sat down there. The driver came, and took out the bull, and when the bull saw his master, he shook his tail, and showed his alacrity by sounds and actions, bounding about in such a manner that the merchant laughed until he fell backwards. His wife, in surprise, asked him, "At what dost thou laugh?" He answered, "At a thing that I have heard and seen, but I cannot reveal, for if I did, I should die." Okay. I'm going to skip slightly. I have an edition that has a lot of notes by a translator and a historian, so sometimes when I'm pausing like this, it's because I'm kind of jumping over them to try and figure out where to go next. It's not very well Very well formatted. I should probably find a better one. Now he had a cock with 50 hens under him, and he also had a dog. He heard the dog call to the cock and reproach him, saying, "Art thou happy when our master is going to die?" The cock asked, "How so?" The dog related to him this story, upon which the cock exclaimed, "Our master has little sense. I have 50 wives, and I please this and provoke that, while he has but one wife, and cannot manage this affair with her. Why does he not take some twigs of the mulberry tree, and enter her chamber, and beat her until she dies or repents?" So this comes after a section before it's quite dense, but the point is that the wife and the merchant are having an argument because he won't tell her that he can understand the speech of animals. It's kind of weird, but it makes sense in context, I suppose. Maybe not the thing about the cock telling him to go beat his wife, but the story at least makes sense. So, right. Now said the vizier to his daughter Scheherazade, "Perhaps I may do to thee as the merchant did to his wife." She asked, "And what did he do?" He answered, "He entered her chamber after he had cut some twigs of the mulberry tree and hidden them there, and then said to her, 'Come into the chamber, that I may tell thee the secret while no one sees me, and then die.' And when she had entered, he locked the chamber door upon her, and beat her until she became almost senseless, and cried out, 'I repent.' And she kissed his hands and feet, and repented, and went out with him and all company. And our own family rejoiced, and they lived together in their happiest manner until death." So, it's a bit difficult to follow because the text is quite dense. But what the vizier is telling the Princess Scheherazade is that the story is that the wife has a reasonable concern, and she acts in a reasonable manner, where the merchant seems to have this magical power, but he won't tell her about it, and she gets angry about this. And then ultimately he beats her into submission, which is awful, obviously. And the vizier is saying, if she goes to try and try and influence the king, or tries to diffuse the situation that's causing this problem with the king, that essentially she might regret doing that, even if it's for the right reasons. I think that's kind of the idea. When the vizier's daughter heard the words of her father, she said to him, "It must be as I have requested." So he arrayed her and went to King Shahryar. She had now given directions to her young sister, saying to her, "When I have gone to the king, I will send to request thee to come. And when thou comest to me, and sees a convenient time, do thou say to me, 'O sister, relate to me some strange story to beguile our waking hour, and I will relate to thee a story that shall, if it be the will of God, be the means of procuring our deliverance.'" So as I said, this is the famous part of the story. This is the plan. The father, the vizier, then took her to the king, who, when she saw him, was rejoiced, and said, "Hast thou brought me what I desired?" "Yes," he answered. When the king, therefore, introduced himself to her, she wept, and he said to her, "What aileth thee?" She answered, "O king, I have a young sister, and I wish to take leave of her." So the king sent to her, and she came to her sister, and embraced her, and sat near the foot of the bed. And after she had waited for a proper opportunity, she said, "O my sister, relate to us a story to beguile the waking hour of our night." "Most willingly," answered Scheherazade, "if this virtuous king permit me." And the king, hearing those words, and being restless, was pleased with the idea of listening to the story. And thus, on the first night of the 1001, Scheherazade commenced her recitations. So thus ends the introduction. So just as a quick recap, we'll just get to the... So I'm just skipping this. This is a long and kind of detailed kind of deconstruction of this that follows. I'm going to skip till I get to the actual next actual part of the story. Okay. So most, as I said, a lot of children in the UK have the story read to them at some point in time, or at least sections of it, and that's where they get familiarity from of characters like Aladdin and Ali Baba and various different characters that are present in these stories. But the Princess Scheherazade is a very celebrated character in fiction as the great grand storyteller, cunning and wise, which obviously for women, especially in fantasy fiction from this era and perhaps earlier, is kind of unusual, right? And that was seen as an interesting thing that she's the daughter of a vizier who, with only her cunning and her book smarts and her reading, outwits a king. And that's a hell of a thing when you think about it. That's one of the reasons why the story persists. So, as said, we talked about the Princess Bride a moment ago. The stories exist within a framing device, and that's the framing device that we just had. The king is going to sleep, and he is intent on killing his wife each night and taking a new wife. And the Princess Scheherazade believes that she can tell him stories that are so fantastical and so incredible that he will want to know more, and she'll survive to the next night and the next and the next. And therein lies the appeal of the 1001 Nights. So I'm just going to take a break for a moment, and when I come back, we will start on the first tale, which is the story of the merchant and the genie. Be right back. Let's see. Just need to. Just need to do a little spot of recalibration. So I'm just going to do that now. Where is my camera? That should do, I think. Yeah, that'll do it. Okay. So we're going to continue. Right, so we have gotten through the framing device, and we're now going to deal with the first proper actual tale of the 1001 Nights, as related by Princess Scheherazade. So, the first, commencing with the first night and ending with part of the third, the story of the merchant and the genie. Actually, before I begin, you will notice that genies feature in a lot of stories in the 1001 Nights. Yeah, that's a stylistic thing. I think it's the thing that most people remember from it, really. So, the story of the merchant and the genie. It has been related to me, O happy king, said Scheherazade, that there was a certain merchant who had great wealth and traded extensively with surrounding countries. And one day he mounted his horse and journeyed to a neighboring country to collect what was due to him. And the heat oppressed him, and he sat under a tree in a garden. He put his hand into his saddlebag and ate a morsel of bread and a date which were among his provisions. Having eaten the date, he threw aside the stone, and immediately there appeared before him an Efreet of enormous height, who, holding a drawn sword in his hand, approached him and said, Rise, that I may kill thee, as thou hast killed my son. Quick aside, Efreet is another word for genie. The merchant asked him, How have I killed thy son? He answered, When thou atest the date, thou throwest aside the stone. It struck my son upon the chest, and had fate agreed against him. He instantly died. The merchant, upon hearing these words, exclaimed, Verily to God we belong, and verily to him we must return. There is no strength nor power but in God, the high, the great. People will probably notice that that's like a stock Islamic phrase. You hear that in a few places. If I had killed him, I did it not intentionally, but without knowing it, and I trust in thee that thou wilt pardon me. The genie answered, Thy death is indispensable, as thou hast killed my son. And so saying, he dragged him and threw him upon the ground, and raised his arm to strike him with a sword. The merchant upon this wept bitterly, and said to the genie, I commit my affair unto God, for no one can avoid what he hath decreed. The genie said to him, "Spare thy words, for thy death is unavoidable." Then said the merchant, "Know, O Ifrit, that I have debts to pay, and I have much property, children, and a wife. And I have pledges also in my possession. Let me, therefore, go back to my house and give everyone his due, and then I will return to thee. I bind myself by a vow and covenant that I will return, and thou shalt do what thou wilt, and God is witness of what I say." Upon this, the genie accepted his covenant and liberated him, granting him a respite until the expiration of the year. The merchant, therefore, returned to his town, accomplished all that was on his mind to do, paid every one that had owed him, and informed his wife and children of the event that had befallen him, upon hearing which they and all his family wept. He appointed a guardian over his children, and remained with his family until the end of the year. Then he took his grave clothes under his arm, bade farewell to his household and neighbours, and all his relations, and went forth in spite of himself, his family raising cries of lamentation. He proceeded until he arrived at the garden before mentioned, and it was the first day of the new year. And as he sat, weeping for the calamity which he expected to soon befall him, a sheik, advanced in years, approached him, leading a gazelle with a chain attached to its neck. This sheik saluted the merchant, wished him a long life, and said to him, "What is the reason of thy sitting alone in this place, seeing that it is a resort of the jinn?" Jinn, by the way, is also another name for genie. The merchant, therefore, informed him of what had befallen with the Ifrit, and of the cause of his sitting there, at which the sheik, the owner of the gazelle, was astonished, and said, "By Allah, O my brother, thy faithfulness is great, and thy story is wonderful. If it were engraved upon the intellect, it would be a lesson to him who would be admonished." Oh, thanks, Tazareth. That's great to know. Where were we? If it were engraved upon the intellect, it would be a lesson to him who would be admonished. And he sat down by his side and said, "By Allah, O my brother, I will not quit this place until I see what will happen unto thee with this Ifrit." I mean, same. You know, if you go and you're out in the desert and you see a guy and he says, "Oh, a genie's going to turn up and kill me in like an hour," and he's like really, really dedicated. Like like he's not joking. You can tell he really means this. I mean, you're gonna stay and watch that, right? Like, I mean, you're not gonna leave, because even if you don't believe him, you're still gonna want to see what's gonna happen. I mean, that's a hell of a thing to just kind of see some random dude who's like, "Oh yeah, genie's gonna kill me. It's gonna happen in the morning." Yeah, sucks. I've been preparing for it for months. Okay. Back to the mode. So he sat down and conversed with him, and the merchant became almost senseless. Fear entered him, and terror and violent grief, and excessive anxiety. A genie is about to come and kill him with a sword. I mean, I would be anxious. That is reasonable reason for anxiety. I mean, I'm a wellness guy, stoicism and everything like that, but okay. And as the owner of the gazelle sat by his side, lo, a second sheik approached them with 2 black hounds, and inquired of them, after saluting them, the reason of their sitting in that place, seeing that it was a resort of the Jan. Okay, Jan is another word for genie. There are a lot of words for genie, okay? It's like a genie thesaurus, this book. And they told him the story from beginning to end. He had hardly sat down when there approached them a third sheik with a dapple mule, and he asked them the same question, which was answered in the same manner. Immediately after, the dust was agitated and became an enormous revolving pillar approaching them from the midst of the desert. And this dust subsided, and behold, the genie, with drawn sword in hand, his eyes casting forth sparks of fire. He came to them, and dragged from them the merchant, and said to him, Rise, that I may kill thee as thou killedst my son, the vital spirit of my heart. And the merchant wailed and wept, and the 3 sheiks also manifested their sorrow by weeping and crying aloud and wailing. But the first sheik, who was the owner of the Giselle, recovering his self-possession, kissed the hand of the Ifrit, and said to him, O thou genie, the crown of the kings of the Jann, if I relate to thee the story of myself and this Giselle, and thou find it to be wonderful, and more so than the adventure of this merchant, wilt thou give up to me a third of the claim to his blood? He answered, Yes, O sheik, if thou relate to me the story, and I find it as thou hast said, I will give up to see. Give up. I need to have like a mistakes jar. I think that's something I might add for the next stream. But we'll click on that and we'll add like a thing to that every time I trip over my words. Yes, O sheik, if thou relate to me the story, and I find it to be as thou hast said, I will give up to thee a third of my claim to his blood. Then said the sheik, Know, O Ifrit, that this Giselle is the daughter of my paternal uncle, and she is of my flesh and my blood. I took her as my wife when she was young, and lived with her for about 30 years, but I was not blessed with a child by her. So I took to me a concubine slave, and by her I was blessed with a male child, the rising full moon, so like the rising full moon, with beautiful eyes, and delicately shaped eyebrows, perfectly formed limbs. And he grew up little by little, until he attained the age of 15. At this period, I unexpectedly had occasion to journey to a certain city, and went thither with a great stock of merchandise. Now my cousin, this Giselle, had studied enchantment and divination from her early years, and during my absence she transformed the youth above mentioned into a calf, and his mother into a cow, and committed them to the care of the herdsman. And when I returned after a long time from my journey, I asked after my son and his mother. She said, Thy slave is dead, and thy son hath fled, and I don't know where he is gone. After hearing this, I remained for the space of a year, mourning heart and weeping of eye, until the festival of the sacrifice, when I sent to the herdsman and ordered him to choose for me a fat cow, and he brought me one, and it was my concubine, whom this Giselle had enchanted. I tucked up my... Actually, that's kind of impressive. Like, dude recognizes his wife, even in transformed cow form. Okay? So, speaking as a furry, I have opinions about this. I think we're just gonna kind of breeze past it, but I have opinions. I tucked up my skirts and sleeves, and took the knife in my hand, and prepared myself to slaughter her, upon which she moaned and cried so violently that I left her, and ordered the herdsman to kill and skin her. He did so, but found in her neither fat nor flesh, nor anything but skin and bone. And I repented of slaughtering her, when the repentance was of no avail. I therefore gave her to the herdsman, and said to him, Bring me a fat calf. And he brought me my son, who was transformed into a calf. When the calf saw me, he broke his rope, came to me, and fawned upon me, and wailed and cried, so that I was moved with pity for him. And I said to the herdsman, Bring me a cow, and let this... Here, we're going to go back to the framing device now. Here, Scheherazade perceived the light of morning and discontinued the recitation with which she had been allowed thus far to proceed. Her sister said to her, "How excellent is thy story, and how pretty, how pleasant and sweet." But she answered, "What is this in comparison with that which I will relate to thee in the next night, if I live, and the king spare me?" And the king said, "By Allah, I will not kill her until I hear the remainder of her story." Thus they pleasantly passed the night until the morning, when the king went forth to his hall of judgment, and the vizier went thither with the grave clothes under his arm. And the king gave judgment, and invested and displaced until the close of day, without informing the vizier of that which had happened, and the minister was greatly astonished. The court was then dissolved, and the king returned to the privacy of his palace. On the second and each succeeding night, Scheherazade continued so to interest King Shahryar by her stories as to induce him to defer putting her to death, in expectation that her fund of amusing tales would soon be exhausted, and as this is expressed in the original work, in nearly the same words at the close of every night, such repetitions in this version are omitted. That's actually a note I've just read, but it's quite useful to know. When the sheik, continued Scheherazade, observed the tears of the calf, his heart sympathized with him, and he said to the herdsman, "Let this calf remain with the cattle." Meanwhile, the genie wondered at the strange story, and the owner of the gazelle thus proceeded. "O Lord of the kings of the Jann, while this happened, my cousin the gazelle looked on, and said, 'Slaughter this calf, for he is fat.' But I could not do it. So I ordered the herdsman to take him back, and he took him and went away. And as I was sitting on the following day, he came to me and said, 'O my master, I have to tell thee something that thou wilt be rejoiced to hear, and a reward is due for me bringing this good news.' I answered, 'Well,' and he said, 'O merchant, I have a daughter who learned an enchantment from her youth from an old woman in our family. And yesterday, when thou gavest me the calf, I took him to her, and she looked at him and covered her face and wept, and then laughed and said, "O my father, hath thy condition become so degraded, in thy opinion, that thou bringest before me strange men? Where, said I, are any strange men, and wherefore didst thou weep and laugh?" The merchant, she answered, "This calf is with thee, the son of our master, the merchant, and the wife of our master hath enchanted both him and his mother. And this was the reason for my laughter. But as to the reason of my weeping, it was on account of his mother, because his father has slaughtered her." And I was excessively astonished at this, and scarcely was I certain that the light of morning had appeared, when I hastened to inform thee. When I heard, O Genie, the words of the herdsman, I went forth with him, intoxicated without wine, from the excessive joy and happiness that I had received, and arrived at his house, where his daughter welcomed me, kissed my hand, and the calf came to me and fawned upon me. And I said to the herdsman's daughter, "Is that true which thou hast said respecting this calf?" She answered, "Yes, O my master, he is verily thy son, and the vital spirit of thy heart." "O maiden," said I, "if thou wilt restore him, all the cattle and property of mine that my father hath under his care shall be thine." Upon this she smiled and said, "O my master, I have no desire for the property, unless on two conditions. The first, thou shalt marry me to him, and the second, I shall enchant her who enchanted him, and so restrain her. Otherwise I shall not be secure from her artifice." On hearing, O Genie, these her words, I said, and thou shalt have all the property that is under the care of thy father besides. And as to my cousin, even her blood shall be lawful to thee. I'm just going to get some water. Okay. So when she heard this, she took a cup and filled it with water, and repeated a spell over it, and sprinkled it with the calf, saying to him, If God created thee a calf, remain in this form, and be not changed. But if thou be enchanted, return to thy original form, by permission of God, whose name be exalted. Upon which he shook, and became a man. And I threw myself upon him, and I said, I conjure thee that thou relate to me all that my cousin did to thee and to thy mother. So he related to me all that had happened to them both. And I said to him, O my son, God hath given thee one to liberate thee, and to avenge thee. And I married to him, O genie, the herdsman's daughter, after which she transformed my cousin into this Giselle. And as I happened to pass this way, I saw this merchant. I asked him what had happened to him, and when he informed me, I sat down to see the result. This is my story. The genie said, This is a wonderful tale, and I give to thee a third of my claim upon his blood. The second sheikh, the owner of the 2 hounds, then advanced and said to the genie, If I relate to thee, you probably start to notice a pattern now, by the way, streakers, but we'll keep going. If I relate to thee the story of myself and these hounds, and thou find it to be in like manner and wonderful, wilt thou remit to me also a third of the claim to the blood of this merchant? The genie answered, Yes. And this begins the story of the second sheikh and the 2 black hounds. Then said the sheikh, Know, O lord of the kings of the Jann, that these 2 hounds are my brothers. My father died and left to us 3,000 pieces of gold. I opened a shop to sell and buy, but one of my brothers made a journey with a stock of merchandise and was absent from us for the space of a year. Well, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's another one for the jar. And was absent from us for the space of a year with the caravans, after which he returned destitute. I said to him, Did I not advise thee to abstain from travelling? But he wept and said, O my brother, to whom be ascribed all might and my brother, God, to whom be ascribed all might and glory, decreed this event, and there is no longer any profit in these words. I have nothing left. So I took him up to the shop, and went with him to the bath, and clad him in a costly suit of my own clothing, after which we sat down together to eat. I said to him, O my brother, I will calculate the gain of my shop during the year, divide it, and exclusive of the principal, between me and thee. Accordingly, I made the calculation, and I found my gain to 2,000 pieces of gold. And I praised God, to whom he be ascribed all might and glory, and rejoiced exceedingly, and divided the gain in 2 equal parts between myself and him. My other brother set forth on a journey, and after a year returned in the like condition, and I did unto him as I had done to the former. Before we move on, the thing that's interesting, and something that is pointed out about the 1001 Nights that's quite interesting, is that we have the framing device where the Princess Scheherazade is relating these stories to King Shahryar. Okay. But then within those stories, there are individuals that relate stories to other individuals. It's kind of like a story inception. So this happens, it can get several layers deep, so it can be a bit dense. But the thing, or one of the things about the book, which I understand is quite celebrated, is that the narrative voice of the characters is preserved, even though it's through two levels of storytelling, like framing devices. So you'll notice that the sheiks make references to, God be great, or God be good, or all might and whatever. They make these allusions, and they these blessings and things, and it's because they're meant to be holy men of a sort, and that's why they their voice is kind of preserved in the texts. It's just kind of interesting. Anyway, let's continue. After this, when we had lived together for some time, my brothers again wished to travel, and they would desire it. They were desirous? That's an interesting one, chat. Desirous. Desirous. I mean, I understand what it means, but I guess that's probably just a very uncommon word in modern English. But anyway, they were desirous that I should accompany them, but I would not. What, said I, have ye gained in your travels, that I should expect to gain? They importuned me, but I would not comply with their request, and we remained selling and buying in our shops for a whole year. Still, however, they persevered in proposing that we should travel. I still refused, until after the lapse of 6 entire years, when I consented and said to them, "O my brothers, let us calculate what property we possess." We did so, and found it to be 6,000 pieces of gold. I then said to them, "We will bury half of it in the earth, that it may be of service to us if any misfortune befall us, in which case each of us shall take 1,000 pieces with which to traffic." "Excellent is thy advice," said they. So I took the money and divided it into 2 equal portions, and buried 3,000 pieces of gold. And then of the other half, I gave to each of them 1,000 pieces. We then prepared merchandise, and hired a ship, embarked our goods, and proceeded on our voyage for the space of a whole month, at the expiration of which we arrived at a city, where we sold our merchandise. For every piece of gold we gained 10. The brothers are actually pretty good businessmen when you think about it. I mean, 90% markup, I mean, that's crazy. What are they selling? And when we were about to set sail again, we found on the shore of the sea a maiden clad in tattered garments, who kissed my hand and said to me, "O my master, art thou possessed of charity and kindness? If so, I will requite thee for them." I answered, "Yes, I have those qualities, that thou requite me not." Then said she, "O my master, accept me as thy wife, and take me to thy country, for I gave myself to thee. Act kindly for..." That's another one for the jar. "Act kindly towards me, for I am one who requires to be treated with kindness and charity. He will requite thee for so doing, and let not my present condition at all deceive thee." When I heard these words, my heart was moved with tenderness towards her, in order to the accomplishment of a purpose of God, to whom be ascribed almighty glory. There it is again. And I took her, and clothed her, and furnished for her a place in the ship in a handsome manner, and regarded her with kind and respectful attention. We then set sail, and I became most cordially attached to my wife, that on her account I neglected the society of my brothers, who, in consequence, became jealous, and likewise envied me and my wealth, and the abundance of my merchandise, casting the eyes of covetousness upon the whole of the property. They therefore consulted together to kill me and take my wealth, saying, "Let us kill our brother, and all the property shall be ours." And the devil made these actions to seem fair in their eyes, so that when they came to me while I was sleeping by the side of my wife, they took both of us up and threw us into the sea. But as soon as my wife awoke, she shook herself and became transformed into a Jinnia. See, Jinnia is another word for genie. I think Jinnia means like female genie. I'm gonna have to look that one up. In fact, let me do that now. Jinnia. That's Jinneeyeh. What is feminine form of genie? Yes, I thought so. Into a Jinnia. She immediately bore me away and placed me upon an island, and for a while disappeared. In the morning, however, she returned and said to me, I am thy wife who carried thee and rescued thee from death. By permission of God, whose name be exalted. Know that I am a Jinnia. I saw thee, and my heart loved thee for the sake of God. For I am a believer in God and his apostle. God bless and save him. I came to thee in the condition which thou sawest me, and thou didst marry me, and see, I have rescued thee from drowning. But I am incensed against thy brothers, and I must kill them. When I heard her tale, I was astonished, and I thanked her for what she had done. But, said I, as to the destruction of my brothers, it is not what I desire. I then related to her all that had happened between myself and them from first to last, and when she had heard it, she said, I will, this next night, fly to them, and sink their ship, and destroy them. But I said, if I conjure thee by Allah that thou do it not, for the author of the proverb saith, O thou benefactor of him that hath done evil, the action that he hath done is sufficient for him. Besides, they are at all events my brothers. She still, however, said, they must be killed, and I continued to propitiate her towards them. And at last she lifted me up, and soared through the air, and placed me upon the roof of my house. Having opened the doors, I dug up what I had hidden in the earth, and after I had saluted my neighbours, I bought merchandise, and I opened my shop. And in the following night, I entered my house, found these two dogs tied up in it, and as soon as they saw me, they came to me, and wept, and clung to me. But I knew not what had happened, until immediately my wife appeared before me, and said, These are thy brothers. And who, said I, hath done this to them? She answered, I sent to my sister, and she did it. And they shall not be restored until after the lapse of 10 years. And I was now on my way to her that she might restore them, as they have been in this state for 10 years, when I saw this man, being informed of what had befallen him, I determined not to quit this place, until I should have seen what would happen between thee and him. This is my story. Verily, said the genie, it is a wonderful tale, and I give up to thee a third of the claim that I had to his blood on account of his offence. Upon this, the third sheikh, the owner of the mule, said to the genie, As to me, bring not my heart if I relate to thee nothing more than this. And we begin the story of the third sheikh and the mule. Oh, I'm just going to stretch for a sec. So I have some water here. Let's have a touch of that. That's so much better. Okay. The story of the third sheikh and the mule. The mule that thou seest was my wife. Yeah, well, no surprise. I mean, at this point, this kind of was a bit of an obvious conclusion. I think everyone was kind of expecting that, but okay. She became enamored of a slave, and when I discovered her with him, she took a mug of water, and, having uttered a spell over it, sprinkled me, and transformed me into a dog. Oh, that's actually a twist. In this state, I ran to the shop of a butcher whose daughter saw me, and, being skilled in enchantment, restored me to my original form, and instructed me to enchant my wife in the manner thou beholdest. And now I hope that thou wilt permit me to also a third of the merchant's offence. Divinely was he gifted who said, so good, even on an unworthy soil, for it will not be lost wherever it is sown. It's actually a really, really nice line. When the sheik had thus finished his story, very short story, the third guy. You think the first guy's got this really long story about about his wife being transformed into a Giselle on, well, actually no, it was concubine, who like bewitched his wife. And then the second one's got this really long story about his brothers who got changed into dogs. And they're like 20 minutes to read them. And then the third guy's, oh yeah, I got turned to a dog, but I got better. That's the story. No, really, that's it. And you're like, and the genie's like, oh yeah, that's fine. Do you think the first two guys might have just kind of looked at it? Could have probably didn't have to stretch that story out quite as much. As genies, that's probably quite easily impressed. But whatever. When the sheik had thus finished his story, the genie shook with delight and remitted the remaining third of his claim to the merchant's blood. The merchant then approached the sheiks and thanked them, and they congratulated him on his safety, and each went their way. But this, said Scheherazade, is not more wonderful than the story of the fisherman. The king asked her, what is the story of the fisherman? And she related it as follows. But, streakers, just like Scheherazade, I will stop here, and you, like the King Shariah, will have to wait for the next one. Because I think this is a really good place to stop. So, thank you, all of you who came in. We had several people throughout, and we had a few people drop in and out here and there. I hope you enjoy these stories, and I will continue them in future streams. Maybe see how far we can get through the entire text. It'll take a few, but I think it's worth it. I mean, like I said at the beginning, this was read to me as a child, and I think the version I had read to me was abridged. But even so, they're kind of amazing. They're pretty whimsical, and they do make great bedtime stories. I mean, there's a lot of killing and so on, but outside of that, they are quite whimsical. But I think this is where I will stop. So, thank you so much for coming out, streakers, and good night from Soul's Place, where the drinks are cold, the friends are warm, and the sun is always shining. See you later.